Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to continue our conversation about properties, especially as we go into algebra. So we're going to talk about 4 properties today. None of these are new. I just want to do a good refreshing of your mind of what these properties are. So the first property is the commutative property. And this is where we have the rule that in addition and multiplication, order doesn't matter. Okay, so when I look at these terms that I have here, I can reorder them to be able to put things together. So, for example, this y cannot be combined with the x's. So I can reorder the x's to be next to each other so that I can work out the problem. So I'd have 6x, then I would bring over the plus 2x, and then I would put the plus 5y, okay? Because that y cannot be combined with the x's in addition. In multiplication, there's a little different rule. So we want to make sure that we understand that there are 2 different types of commutative property, one for addition and one for multiplication. So here I can combine these 2 to then have 8x, and then I can bring down that 5y that I cannot combine with the 8x, okay? So commutative property only works for addition and multiplication, and order doesn't matter. So here's an example of an addition. Here's an example of a multiplication. So this one gets a little more complicated because we have to remember that these coefficients have an implied multiplication with the variable that comes after. So this really means 5 times x times 3y times 2 times x. There should be a times here. Sorry, I forgot. Okay. Now I can reorder these to put things together. So I'm going to put the 3 numbers together first. So I'm going to put the 5 times the 3 times the 2. Then I'm going to put all the x's together, times x times x times x, because there are 3 of them, 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to do the y. Okay. Now I can then combine these because I've reordered them so that the like things are together. So if I were to do 5 times 3, that's 15. 15 times 2 is 30. And then I have x times x times x, which is x to the 3rd power, very different than what we did here, and then times y. Okay, so we have to remember that the commutative property works for both operations, but it works a little differently. Okay, then we also have the associative property. The associative property, again, only works with addition and multiplication, and it says that you can group like things. Now, to be honest, these 2 work together all the time because I did group like things here and I did group like things here, okay? So we have to, excuse me, we have to be aware that sometimes when we use the commutative property, we automatically are using the associative property. But I'm going to make it a little more obvious here, okay? Oftentimes, when using the associative property, we like to use parentheses to show that we're grouping like things. So in this problem, I'm going to show that these things are alike, and I can group them and sort out the answer here. And this thing is not alike, so I can't group it with the others. I have no idea why that keeps focusing, you guys. I'm so sorry. So when I put the 3x plus x together, I end up with 4x. Okay? And then this 4y doesn't go with it, so it has to stay by itself, plus 4y. Now down here, I'm going to show the grouping a little bit differently. So this was an addition problem. This is a multiplication problem. Here I'm going to rewrite and group. So I have 2 things that are x's. So I'm going to put those together. 5x squared times 3x. and I have two things with y's, and I'm going to put those together. So that will be times 2y times 4y squared. Okay, now I just showed with parentheses that I grouped some things. Okay, but technically I didn't have to do that. Okay, because remember, there's implied multiplication between the coefficient and the variable, and there's implied multiplication in the exponent as well, here and here. So what this really is 5 times x times 3 times x times 2 times y times 4 times y times y. Okay, and now I can definitely see, oh, there's some things I can group together. For example, I can group together all of the numbers. Okay, so I'm going to kind of come into this space. I should have left more room. I'm sorry. I can group the 5 times the 3 times the 2 times the 4. Then I can group the x's together, times x times x times x. And then I can group the y's together, times y times y times y. Okay, and when I put all of that together, this is a messy one. I'm going to do 5 times 4 is 20, 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 times 20 is 120? Yes, 120. Okay, then I'm going to put the x's together, so x to the third power, x multiplied 3 times, and y to the third power, or y multiplied 3 times. Okay, now this is another property that next year you're really going to talk about. We kind of I like introduce it in 5th grade. We talk about a little bit in 6th grade, but in 7th grade you're really going to use this identity property, and you're going to use it with positive and negative numbers, which is why it's so powerful. So in addition, you just need to know that in order to get an answer back to be the same as what it started as, you are going to add 0. So what I said was kind of confusing. Let me give you an example. If I were to take 7 and add 0, whoops, I get back that 7 that I started with. Okay, so anytime I add 0, I'm not changing anything. All right, this is really powerful next year in 7th grade when you start dealing with the positive and negative numbers. Okay, in multiplication, it's not 0, it happens to be multiplying by 1. Okay, I know if I take any number and multiply it by 1, I'm going to get that number back again. Okay, so I'm just going over all the properties with you so that you have heard them and are familiar with them, and then as they come up, you can do more work with them. Like, for example, this associative property, you were introduced to it in 5th grade, but you didn't do a lot with it. But this year in 6th grade, you can see that we definitely use it more. Okay, now the distributive property, we know, is where we take a number and we distribute it to multiple terms, usually with the operation of multiplication. There are some exceptions to that, and you'll talk a lot about that next year, but I'm not going to get into them. We're just doing the basics of the distributive property in 6th grade. Okay, so when I take this and I multiply it or distribute it to the 3x, I'm going to do 5 times 3 is 15. And then x times x is x squared. Okay, bring the plus sign over because I'm not actually doing addition. Then I'm going to do the same thing here. The 5x times the 2. The 5 times the 2 is 10. And the x isn't being multiplied by anything other than the 5 and the 2. So you just have 1x. Okay, here again, we're going to distribute the 4 to the terms inside the parentheses. So if I have this 4 and I distribute it to the 3xy, I'm only going to be able to multiply the 4 and the 3, which will give me 12. And then I'm still going to have the x and the y multiplied by the numbers. But until I know what they are, they have to stay in an x and a y. Okay. And then lastly, I'm going to distribute the 4 to the 6x squared. So 4 times 6 is 24. And then I'm just going to keep that x squared because until I know what x is, there's nothing else I can do. Okay, I know this is new information, but we're going to be practicing it a lot. So I want you to do your practice today in Khan Academy, and just do the best you can working through these properties. And again, I will be here for you if you need me.